Joined in the studio by Finance Minister and spokesman for the campaign, Senator Penny Wong. Senator Wong, good morning.
Good morning to you both.
On that point that Scott Morrison was making about an MOU possibly being signed in the next few days during the caretaker period, technically speaking, that can't happen, can it?
Well, I think it's interesting that the Coalition are continuing to try and undermine this agreement and undermine these arrangements, which is all about trying to stop the flow of people movement and to break the business model of the people smugglers. I mean, on the one hand, Scott Morrison originally said they were going to support it, and now all we see is them undermining it. It's clearly not in the national interest.
Let's go to the point, though. Can that happen during the caretaker period or not? Do you plan for that to happen during the caretaker period?
Well, if the MOU is finalised, yes, it can. I mean, the point is, this has already been announced. We've had the Prime Ministers of both nations publicly articulate the agreement and set out the Prime Ministerial agreement. So this is just implementing something which has already been agreed.
So it is going to go ahead. There'll be some formal signing during this caretaker period, and you say that'll be legitimate and valid.
Well, if it were to happen, it is legitimate and valid. The details of that are something Minister Burke is obviously in charge of. In
his interview with us, Scott Morrison also said from the Liberal Party's perspective there are at least spaces for 4,000 people, if not considerably more, on Nauru. Is that a realistic view?
Well, all I can say on this is that the Liberal Party's position continues to change. On the one hand, they say they do want to support. Originally, they said they did want to support the PNG agreement. Now they don't. Now they're talking about Nauru, but they've made clear that there's a cap on it, which is clearly not going to work as a disincentive for people to get on a boat. And we know really over the last few years, the Liberal Party progressed very few steps from stop the boats as a policy.
Penny Wong, let's talk about the interest rate cut that's expected today. There are low rates, which most governments say they want, and they insist that they keep rates low for people who have mortgages. And then there are alarmingly low rates. It's true, isn't it, that if rates are cut again today, then the RBA must be worried about the economy. That just follows logically. Otherwise, they wouldn't be cutting.
Well, let's understand a few things first. The first thing is this. We've seen Joe Hockey out actually arguing against an interest rate cut. It's a pretty extraordinary position, saying to Australian families, I want you to pay more. I want you to pay more on your mortgage. The second point I'd make is you would probably recall during the Howard and Costello years, every time there was an interest rate cut, John Howard and Peter Costello would say, this is a sign of great economic management. So it appears that the Liberal Party's position is interest rate cuts under a Liberal government are a sign of good economic management, but interest rate cuts under a Labor government are something else. Well, I don't agree with Joe Hockey. It is the case, Virginia. The economy is going through a period of change, and low interest rates are a part of managing that change, and that's ultimately a matter for the Reserve Bank. But I think for Joe Hockey to go out and say to Australians, you should pay more on your interest rates, really shows how out of touch he is.
But low interest rates, as you well know as Finance Minister, are a way of kick-starting the economy.
Well, and the RBA and the government have made clear we are going through a significant transition in our economy. We've got a resources boom that's coming off. We've got growth moderating in our major trading partner, China. We do have to manage a transition. Monetary policy, i.e. interest rates, is an important part of that, as is the government's budget plans, which are to make sure we don't chase revenue down when growth is softening, unlike what Joe Hockey is advocating, which is cuts to the bone.
But then this is ultimately Joe Hockey's point. If the economy is struggling, then rates are cut.
I think Joe Hockey's point is he doesn't want Australians to have relief on their cost of living, which is a pretty extraordinary thing for an opposition spokesperson to be saying.
In another matter, a report obtained by the Daily Telegraph from the Department of Infrastructure and Transport. According to that report, no new private sector jobs were created in Western Sydney since 2006, and the region is facing a jobs deficit of up to 500,000 places by 2051. Why have you not been able to create jobs in Western Sydney?
Look, job creation is important, which is why we have steered the economy through the global financial crisis and why we see Australia having created nearly 1 million jobs in that period. Having said that, of course, there are regions which are doing it much harder than others. Western Sydney is one. There are other parts from northern suburbs of Adelaide. These are regions which are finding it much harder than other parts of Australia.
But this is a region of no jobs growth for all of that period.
To generate employment. But I'd make the point, what is your plan for this? I mean, we know what the opposition's plan is, and that's to cut harder. Well, if you cut harder into jobs, health, services, education, you're just going to drive unemployment up. and just reminds us yet again why the government's taken the decision we've taken when the economy is softening, not to cut harder, particularly in the current financial year.
It's not a good way to win the hearts and minds of voters in those clutch of critical marginal seats in Western Sydney, though, the fact that there's been no private jobs since 2006.
And what I'd say to them is, Labor does put jobs growth first, but you have to look at what is the alternative. The alternative is deep cuts to services and deep cuts to the budget, which would simply drive unemployment up. That's what Tony Abbott is proposing.
Well, that's the opposition, but let's focus on what the government is proposing. And you've not disputed those figures this morning, so we accept that that's true and no new jobs created.
Well, hang on.
Or do you dispute those figures?
No, I haven't read the report. I've read the reports of the reports, but
yes.
I am accepting that there are regions in Australia which are doing it tough.
All right,
absolutely.
Well, what's your plan to create jobs there?
Well, the first thing is to run a sound budget and run a sound economy, and to make sure you don't...
Well, it's not going so well so far with cut after cut after cut to expectations.
Virginia, that's with respect, that's not correct. I mean, let's have a look where Australia is placed. At a time we've had millions and millions of jobs lost overseas. I think it's close to 28 million worldwide. Together we have created 1 million jobs. Now we want, or nearly 1 million jobs. Now, of course we want to do more, but the question is never, the question should be, how will you manage this transition at a time where the economy is changing and is softening? And it certainly isn't the prescription that Tony Abbott's putting forward, cuts to the bone.
To a broader political question, will the Labor Party be preferencing the Greens?
Oh, look, these are matters for the party. I'm sure that these negotiations will continue, but I would say this. I mean, the Greens, if they are seriously going to suggest to their voters that they want to put Tony Abbott in the lodge, well, they should be upfront with people about that.
And has Labor yet managed to find a candidate for the New South Wales seat of Dobell, held by the former ALP MP Craig Thompson? We read in the Australian today you're struggling to find someone to stand there.
Well, look, that's a matter for the New South Wales branch, and I'm sure they'll manage that process as they will need to.
And you reckon you'll get someone in the end to actually stand?
I'm sure the New South Wales branch of the party will ensure we have a candidate in Dobell.
We'll leave it there. Penny Wong, thank you.
Good to speak with you.
Thanks so much.